what do you, what do cultural identity, tradition, and architectural preservation have in common? Well, joining us this morning is architectural designer Bryan Johnson. Morning, Bryan. How are you?
Morning. I'm not too bad. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you here. Architectural designer. So a lot of people may confuse that with being an architect. What's the difference? Let's start right there.
So the difference is an architect is someone that is registered to a board or an entity. And in my case, I haven't finished my qualification in its entirety. So I have my bachelor's and my master's.
And in what areas?
In architecture.
Okay.
And then the last thing would be obviously doing the part 3 to become chartered.
Okay, so but you're en route.
Yes, I'm almost there.
You're almost there.
Yes.
What got you interested in architectural design?
Well, it's a very interesting question. I think it stems from my love for deconstructing and constructing things as a child. I was born and raised in Jamaica up until the age of 12, where I migrated to the UK to live with my mother. And she used to come down every summer to Jamaica and bring me Lego, and I used to build things and, and be really captivated by that whole process. And one of my most fondest memories was building trucks out of box juices and butter corks. So that kind of ignited that first flame, I would say. Oh, but we kind of share something similar then, because I grew up in the country. Where did you Brownstone.
So Brownstone, same time. Right, so yes. I grew up in Westmoreland.
Okay.
Right, both rural areas.
Exactly,
right?
yeah. So we're both country boys.
There you go. Got the Legos from my relatives overseas as well.
Yes.
And made vehicles really with, juice boxes and using limes sometimes or corks for the wheels and so on. But you grew up with your grandma, right?
With my grandmother, and pretty much the whole village raised me.
Yes.
To be honest.
Yes.
So from church to grandma to helpers, and everybody, played a part in my upbringing.
Right. Now, but I understand though that having grown up with grandma in Brownstone, you would have been used to some of that old school, old world charm when it comes to like furniture and just literally just buildings.
Yes.
How did that influence you?
So, I think I was not conscious of it growing up, of course. But when I went through this, this ordeal where I was trying to identify myself with the culture. I left Jamaica when I was younger and moved to the UK, so I was in this very grey area where I wasn't really British and I didn't really feel Jamaican. So I used the Masters as an opportunity to go dive deep into my, my heritage. So to answer your question, once I started to take notice of these things, so the furniture, the whatnot, and the mahogany staircases and all these different things, I found that there's stories, rich history behind all these elements that exist around me.
Yes.
So yeah.
And that's coming to bear on your leaning in architecture.
Yes.
What can we expect from you, or what have you been producing? Even in just terms of like design and that kind of a thing, how's that been manifested? So
my latest project would be my most profound project. It kind of explores this idea of imagining spaces that map and paint a vivid picture of our culture. So for me, I reimagine Brownstone. So the streets that I walked, the markets that I visited, the spaces that I went to, I thought about what if these spaces almost told stories about my past and, in some sense ground me into, understanding where I come from. And I feel like that is something that is a bit lacking in Jamaica from my own experiences, seeing these cookie-cutter of Western ideologies of housing and spaces. And I think that, I think it's timely that we start to kind of consider more, the streets that we walk, the pavements that we walk, and then the environments that we exist in. Why is it important, though, to understand our culture through architecture? Good question. I think it's important because architecture is that bridge between the tangible and untangible. By that I mean, it's a physical construct. It documents our history. So from the vernacular old houses that we have in the rural areas, the Wat and Dab houses in St. Elizabeth, down to the Devon House in Kingston. Yeah. It maps an aspect of history that tells a story. Yes, some may be negative, colonialism, but it also maps the aspect that craftsmanship. We the people built these spaces and should be proud of them. Yeah. And those are things that we should take and understand our past and move forward into the future with.
Yeah, when you think of, for example, a town like Falmouth, right?
Rich in history.
Very, very rich in history.
Yeah.
I guess you're of the belief that we should modernize the insides just to make sure that all necessary facilities are there, but certainly from the outside, maintaining that old world, old school charm is an important part of teaching lessons to current generation, yeah?
I mean, yes and no. Yes, in the sense that we should look at preserving some elements. No, in the sense that we should not take what has been passed down to us from, colonial times as our form of architecture. Jamaica is a country that has a magnitude of different cultures within it. Our motto is out of many one people. So it's a thing where we should take what we have been given or passed down to us or whatever the case may be and propel it forward. So yes, maybe renovating on the interior, but also look at what is the current need of our society now. Yeah. Because architecture should be responsive to what we need, not necessarily what we want.
And with that particular mindset, how did that influence your research, given your passion for our identity as a people and not necessarily just inheriting and focusing on what's been given to us or thrown at us?
I think the exercise of wanting to understand myself kind of was a driving force behind all the different things that I looked at. So with my thesis, I engaged in this conversation between the man and the land. So I animated the land to have a humanistic feature. So he would have this conversation with this man. And the idea that as a set of people, our relationship that we have with our land is very capitalistic, where we privatize everything. We have to pay to enjoy our country. Yeah. And in some sense, we have a human right to have public spaces and spaces that, encourage communal activity. Yeah. Fundamentally, I think there's loads of opportunities in Jamaica that I think that once we kind of tap into that romantic mindset of looking at our space, we'll be able to bring out.
Yeah. Once you're chartered, once Bryan becomes officially an architect, how will you bring that to bear on the Jamaican landscape, literally?
Well, it starts off with a vision. I'd like to consider myself as someone that is seeking to be a visionary and given the opportunity and the platform to look at resources and imagine things, just like how my grandma would tell me stories. And I would look at, and rolling calf would be something that scares me at night, and I've never seen a rolling calf. That's something that I feel like once I'm able to tap into that, I can adjust and, help Jamaica envision, spaces that really reflect our people and our culture.
Yeah. If you were to advise, say, persons who are in our municipal councils and so on, persons with responsibility for urban planning and so on.
So parishes.
What would you want them to start considering now, given your studies, your research, and making that connection with Jamaican identity?
Yeah. I think policies will be the first point. We need to consider what we approve and what we deny when it comes to a planning aspect. I think definitely we're a little bit too lenient in the things that we approve. And often we kind of get swayed and biased by under-table hands and things of that nature. But I think policies will be the first thing. We need to have a framework in which we say, this is the type of architecture that we want for particular areas. And we need to maintain that in the sense that we have an architectural language. Right. And then once we are able to adapt that into our spaces, we'll find that our urban spaces change.
Yeah. But then if you have that kind of policy where you're saying, hey, this is the type of architectural design, really, and outlook and vision, doesn't that kind of conflict with the creativity or creative expression of others?
Rather than it being something that is compulsory, it's a guide. Right. To say that once an architect submits planning and documents, it gets, put in front of a council that they then look at the various elements that, does it fit in the site? Does it respond to its context? Does it give up to the community that it should do?
Listen, Bryan, I'm amazed by you. I really respect what you're doing. And I look forward to your work being in a space or in spaces across the island and having the influence that you desire.
No, thank you very much. Well, look out for me.
Absolutely, we certainly will. That was architectural designer Bryan Johnson. Coming up next, we discuss security guards fighting for their rights. Stay with us on Smile.